When Maya James stepped into Westfield Martial Arts Center for her trial class, she carried more than a gym bag. She carried exhaustion from a week of 12-hour shifts at the hospital, the weight of helping patients who often cried on her shoulder, and the need to reclaim a little strength for herself. The dojo smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, the air warm with the kind of disciplined silence that should have made her nervous, but instead felt comforting, like stepping into a place where structure had the power to heal. She had trained lightly years before in college, but life, bills, career, and heartbreaks had carved themselves into her time until she finally realized that self-defense was not a luxury but a necessity. Across the room, students of various belt levels chatted while stretching, and in the center of it all stood Darren Cole. Tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a black belt tied so tightly around his waist it practically screamed ego rather than honor. Darren wasn't teaching, he wasn't the instructor, but he strutted around as if he ran the place, and the other students seemed to either fear or tolerate him. Maya noticed how he adjusted his gloves loudly, cracked his knuckles often, and boasted about sparring matches no one had asked about. When Maya joined the warm-up circle, he looked her up and down with a smirk that lacked respect, muttering something to another guy who gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. But Maya had walked through enough dark emergency room nights and talked down enough angry patients to ignore one insecure loudmouth. What she didn't know was that Darren had a reputation. He loved testing new students by overwhelming them not out of mentorship, but because dominating someone who wasn't ready fed the only thing he actually had, his fragile sense of superiority. When the instructor, Master Rivera, paired Maya with Darren for light drills, she noticed the subtle stiffening of nearby students, the fleeting wince on the face of a brown belt who opened his mouth as if to warn her before deciding to stay silent. But Maya wasn't afraid, though maybe she should have been. Darren's grin widened in the way a cat grins at a mouse. He started the drill with unnecessary force, his kicks landing far heavier than what light meant, his grabs lingering too long, and his jokes aimed low. Maya dodged most of it with surprising grace, and the few strikes he landed she absorbed without complaint. Darren didn't like that. His ego bruised, he escalated, stepping too close, mocking her stance, pushing the boundaries of what the rules allowed. She noticed it all, but didn't let it break her focus. The room watched in uncomfortable silence as he circled her, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Try not to embarrass yourself. Then the drill shifted into a grappling demonstration, and that was when it happened. Without warning, without instruction, without consent, Darren wrapped an arm around Maya's neck in a chokehold meant for controlled training, except he tightened it far beyond safe measure, pulling her off balance, squeezing with a force that had nothing to do with martial arts and everything to do with cruelty. The class gasped, Master Rivera shouted, but Darren held on, grinning like it was a joke. Maya's vision flickered at the edges, but instead of panic, something old and sharp woke inside her, something she had buried long ago during those months of dark self-defense classes after leaving an abusive relationship. Her body remembered things her mind had forgotten she knew. While the room froze and Darren's laughter echoed off the padded walls, Maya planted her feet, dropped her weight, twisted her hips, and performed a textbook escape maneuver he never expected. The choke broke instantly. Darren stumbled, surprised. She didn't strike him, didn't retaliate, she simply stepped back with a calm he couldn't process. That made him angrier. And that anger was about to reveal secrets that would unravel everything the dojo thought they knew about him. Darren lunged again, faster this time, grabbing for her arm with a possessiveness that made several students flinch, but Maya slipped away as easily as mist through fingers. Master Rivera shouted for him to stop, but Darren ignored it. His breath grew harsher, his ego unraveling thread by thread as the room watched a woman he assumed would collapse instead, outmaneuver him without aggression, without fear, without even breaking a sweat. For a moment, Maya wondered what made a man like him tick, what made someone turn martial arts, a discipline meant for respect and self-improvement, into a twisted playground for dominance. She didn't have to wonder long. As Darren barreled forward again, something fell from the pocket of his something small, metallic, and noisy. It clattered across the mat, spinning, drawing everyone's eyes. A key fob. But not just any fob, the custom-made ones the dojo gave only to senior assistants with security clearance. Students recognized it immediately, and a wave of confusion rippled across the room. Darren was not an assistant instructor. He wasn't even officially cleared for unsupervised sparring sessions. Master Rivera froze mid-step, his face tightening. "Darren," he said sharply, "where did you get that?" Darren didn't answer. His eyes darted toward the fob, then toward the exit, calculating. In that tiny hesitation, Maya saw something she'd witnessed before in EA patients running from consequences. Guilt. Fletcher, a timid yellow belt, whispered to another student, "Is that the fob that went missing last month?" Maya noticed Master Rivera's posture shift, no longer simply authoritative but confrontational, as if pieces of a puzzle he had been struggling with suddenly fit together. Darren grabbed the fob quickly, stuffing it into his pocket, but the room had already seen it. And when insecure men feel cornered, they often make their worst decisions. He lunged a third time, this time not for a grip, not for a strike, but for humiliation. He wrapped his arm around her neck again, this time from behind, pulling her tight against his chest in a choke that had nothing to do with technique. Students shouted. Master Rivera took 2 steps forward. Darren squeezed harder. "See?" he hissed. "This is how power works." But Maya was no stranger to violence, and she was no stranger to men who confused cruelty with power. Her heartbeat slowed, her training resurfacing in crisp detail. And in that moment, she remembered a lesson from her old instructor years ago. Someone who abuses technique always leaves themselves exposed. Darren's left foot was forward. His stance was unbalanced, his grip too high, his weight too committed. She lowered herself, slid sideways, grabbed. His wrist rotated under his arm, and before he realized what she was doing, she executed a flawless shoulder throw, one she hadn't practiced in years, but returned to her with perfect clarity. Darren hit the mat so hard, the echo snapped through the room. But that wasn't what made him scream. What made him scream was the way Maya transitioned smoothly, almost gently, into a hold that immobilized his arm at a safe but undeniably dominant angle. She didn't hurt him, he hurt himself, thrashing in humiliation. "Stop! Stop!" he yelled, voice cracking. Maya released him immediately, stepping back. But the damage, the kind that wasn't physical, had already been done. The black belt who choked a woman for fun was now sprawled on the mat, breathless, red-faced, and whimpering like a child whose toy had been taken away. But the humiliation was only beginning. Master Rivera demanded Darren stand, but Darren instead scrambled toward the locker rooms, throwing curses over his shoulder. Several students followed, not to help him but to corner him with questions. Maya, meanwhile, tried to steady her breathing not from fear, but from the return of an old, unwelcome memory of the night she used a similar throw to escape her ex-partner before fleeing her apartment for good. She hadn't thought about that night in years. As she stood in the center of the mat, a hush fell over the room. Some students approached her, one thanked her for exposing Darren's behavior. Another apologized for not warning her earlier. The brown belt who had tried to speak up earlier finally admitted that Darren often harassed newcomers and used the dojo after hours, despite being repeatedly denied clearance. "He said he knew people," the brown belt whispered, "that he could get us kicked out if we reported him. But intimidation only works until someone shows the truth." When Master Rivera returned from the locker rooms, his face was stormy. "He denied everything," the instructor said. "But the security footage doesn't lie, and neither do the timestamps." News spread quickly. Darren had been sneaking into the dojo late at night. Mats had been damaged. Equipment misplaced. Files accessed. Even petty theft from the lost and found locker. But it wasn't just misconduct, it was sabotage. Someone had been loosening bolts on the punching bags, causing 2 minor injuries last month. Someone had been mislabeling gear sizes, messing with training rotations, creating chaos that Rivera had been quietly investigating for weeks. And now the puzzle was complete. Students murmured nervously. Maya listened in stunned silence as Rivera explained that he had suspected an inside saboteur, but never imagined Darren, who had always pretended to be loyal but was actually stirring discord to gain status through manufactured problems only he pretended he could fix. He even applied to be an assistant instructor, Rivera said bitterly. I rejected him. And suddenly things started going wrong. The revelation rippled through the dojo. But Darren wasn't done. From the hallway came a crash, followed by raised voices. Students rushed out. Maya followed with caution. Down the hallway, Darren stood between two lockers, sweat dripping down his temples, eyes wild with desperation. He held a gym bag stuffed hastily with items taken from other students' lockers. Nobody's going to believe you, he shouted when he saw Rivera. You need me here. I'm the best fighter you have. But Maya stepped forward, her voice calm. A real fighter doesn't choke people to feel powerful. A real fighter doesn't steal to feel important. A real fighter doesn't sabotage others to look strong. Darren turned on her, face twisted. You think you embarrassed me? You think you're better than me? Maya didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth hung between them, undeniable. Security was called. Darren tried to run. But the moment he started down the back hallway, he slipped on his own dropped gym bag, falling hard enough to let out another raw scream, this one far more pitiful than the last. Rivera retrieved the stolen items while Darren scrambled backward on the floor, his voice cracking between anger and panic. She attacked me, he cried, pointing at Maya. She assaulted me. She's dangerous. But the students stared at him with a mix of pity and disgust. The footage in the main studio had recorded everything. His choke, the misuse of techniques, his aggressive conduct, not to mention his attempted theft. When security escorted him out, he went limp, muttering insults under his breath. But no one listened anymore. Maya stood quietly, unsure what to do with the attention suddenly on her. Students thanked her again, not because she fought him, but because she exposed the truth they had been too afraid to voice. Rivera approached her last. Are you all right? He asked gently. More than all right, she replied, and surprised herself by meaning it. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a steady warmth of confidence she hadn't felt in years. Rivera nodded slowly. We could use someone like you here. Someone who understands balance, discipline, and respect. Maya blinked. I'm just here for a trial class. Your trial, he said, smiling faintly, is over. The students around her nodded in agreement, and a few even clapped softly, not celebrating Darren's downfall. But Maya's resilience, her calm strength, her ability to stand her ground without losing her humanity. But the biggest twist came later that evening. As Maya left the dojo, duffel bag slung over her shoulder, a woman approached her in the parking lot. She looked familiar, the same woman who had been quietly observing during class. The one Maya assumed was another student waiting for a ride. She stepped forward and introduced herself as Detective Lana Pierce. I've been investigating Darren for months, Pierce explained. I didn't have enough evidence to bring charges. But what he did today, what you exposed, that changes everything. Maya's stomach dropped. Charges? Several, Pierce said, including identity theft, equipment tampering, and harassment toward multiple women across different gyms. Maya felt the world tilt slightly. After everything she'd been through, she had wanted a simple class, a peaceful day, a chance to take control of her life. Instead, she had helped to crack open a case. Your courage, Pierce said, just helped protect a lot of people. The detective walked away, leaving Maya staring at the fading sunlight with the weight of unexpected purpose settling in. She realized then that strength didn't always come from the punches you throw or the techniques you master. Sometimes it came from the moment you refused to let someone take your dignity. Sometimes it came from standing up calmly against someone who thrived on fear. And sometimes it came from reclaiming a part of yourself you thought you had lost. As she drove home that night, Maya smiled for the first time in weeks. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for certain. She would be back at the dojo. Not because she needed to learn how to fight, but because she finally remembered that she already could.